As you know, the Meat Eater Live Tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.
We're back and better than ever. Right, Phil?
Yes.
We're back. We're better than ever. It's THC 2020. Thanks for sitting through the best ofs. We appreciate it. Had 2 great years of podcasts. We're going to have a third, even greater year in 2020, so we're excited about that. We're going to get rolling. We got a lot of things we want to talk about this year, a lot of things to cover. We've been back here at the Meat Eater offices planning 2020, planning some cool trips, segments, cool interview guests, trying to get the best of the best. We got a lot of great through lines and topics we're going to try to cover this year. We're going to try to include a lot of controversies, a lot of interesting people. Keep doing what we've been doing in the past. So keep this as our promise. Phil, really, it's Phil's promise to make this the best year ever.
That's true. That was my idea. I pitched it to you. I said, hey, Ben, what do you think about making 2020 the best year of THC?
I was like, absolutely not. I am tired.
It took some convincing, but yeah, I think you came around.
I came around. So we're gonna make it the best year ever. We're dedicated to make this podcast better. Come along for the ride with us in 2020. But for now, this episode, we're talking about Phil's a backstabber. There's a poem involved. We have 2 teenagers out of Pennsylvania who are being charged with animal cruelty over a video of them abusing a deer that they had shot. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get into that. Pretty crazy turn of events. And then we're going to talk to Dr. James Tantillo from Cornell, a pretty famous ethicist. He's done a lot of thinking on hunting and hunting ethics and philosophies and why hunting makes us better people. So stick around to hear that as well. It's 2020. We're getting going. Episode 97. Enjoy.
I guess I grew up on an older road. A pedal to the metal, always did what I was told. Until I found out that my brand new clothes came secondhand from the rich kids next door. When I grew up fast, I guess I grew up mean. There's 1,000 things inside my head I wish I ain't seen. And now I just wander through a real bad dream, or feeling like I'm coming apart at the seams. But thank you, Jack Daniels. Oh, number 7.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 97 of the Hunting Collective. It's 2020. We're back and better than ever. We're on a month hiatus, Joe. A month we were gone.
A month? Wow.
Yeah. Did you miss us? Well, I was here, though.
Yeah. I didn't miss you.
You didn't miss me.
Because I saw you.
Yeah, you saw me.
Everybody else missed you.
Yeah, I hope you guys we were still coming at you every week, but it was best ofs. And we know best ofs aren't all that exciting to some people. Other people, maybe they are. But we're back. I think we're better than ever. Phil, you think we're better than ever?
I think it's yet to be seen. I think we'll find out.
We'll find out. We intend to be better than ever.
Sure, and I think it's the thought that counts.
But we're going to spoil you listeners with gifts in 2020. That's the way we're going to bribe you into leaving us good reviews and doing good things for the podcast. So don't worry. But we're joined by Anthony Licata.
Hey, Ben.
Fresh back from Mexico.
Yeah.
How was?
Oh, it was terrific, man. We were down in Sonora, Mexico, just south of Arizona, hunting Coues deer. It is a spectacular country.
Yeah.
Really fun hunting. You've done it. The deer are so cool. It's challenging, interesting, and man, it's just beautiful. You know, you're hunting on this massive cattle ranch, and it's a little bit like going back in time. You know, you're staying in an old stone building. This ranch is off the grid. It is worked by traditional cowboys, vaqueros, right?
Vaqueros, yeah.
On horseback.
Who do not want their pictures taken.
No.
I found out last year. I'm like, I'll take your picture. That'd be cool. It'd be great for the gram. Nope.
No, they're not into the gram.
He just pointed to his gun. He's like, I'm just going to keep riding. You're not going to do anything.
But you'll be out there hunting and then you run across, vaquero on a horseback with a couple of dogs and, old lever action rifle and a scabbard. And, he's just making his loop and living out there. It's a real special place.
It's a wonderful thing, especially those of you that are, hunt locally only. When you can travel to hunt like that, you get immersed in the culture of the place and kind of what you transport your style of hunting to a place in a different, and like you said, it's kind of like a different time down there.
Yeah, it really is.
Crossing the border is always interesting.
Yes.
And so I'm glad you guys got to go. If anybody needs an update, not yet, I'm going to say not yet a father because I'm already a father. I'm not yet a double father.
Two-time father.
Not yet
Ben
a two-time
O'Brien,
father.
two-time father.
Two-time father. One-time father as of right now. I think you could technically call me a two-time father. We've had, for those who've been asking, a lot of people have reached out via the Instagrams and even a couple emails as to how everything's going. I want to say it's not going great to this point, but everybody is relatively happy and healthy, and we're looking to have the baby anytime now. So just a quick update. You don't want to hear my sob story about what we've been doing, but while Anthony and team and Cal and Steve were all down in Mexico, I was hanging out in the hospital. And so just quick thanks to the folks in the Bozeman hospital. Like nurses and doctors are legit heroes. We all know this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that enough.
They do good work.
We don't talk about that enough. We talk about sports and musicians. My wife wanted to watch last night the SAG Awards, and I just felt ill watching these people.
I don't even know what that is.
Screen Actors Guild.
Oh.
Just watching these people that really just play around for a living pretend to be important. And I just, after spending days with real important people whose lives a lot of people depend on for them to save them. For me, we're in there asking them questions. How do we do this? What do we do to have this child safely and all these things? It's amazing. So thanks to those folks. And my God, if you see one, thank a military member if you see him. But if you see a nurse or a doctor, thank them too. Because my God, they do some of the most important work on this earth, I would say. So we're going to get into the show, and we're going to keep doing this no matter what happens here at the Hunting Collective. Phil, have you ever been to New Zealand?
I have not.
Would you like to go?
I'd love to. I know that there are dragons and elves.
What?
And hobbits.
What?
Are there not?
There's not.
Oh. Well, I've been misled.
What do you mean? If I took you to New Zealand, you'd want to go like tour the Hobbit town or whatever.
Oh, for sure. Yep. What else is there to do?
How did this guy even get in here? What? You would want to go to Hobbiton.
In all honesty, it looks gorgeous, and I have a feeling you have more to say on the topic.
It's a big deal. First Light, you guys all know First Light. They're going to send somebody out there in listener land or elsewhere to New Zealand. And they're going to send them there with me. I'm just going to go, Joe. I'm just going to go.
Just going to go and watch?
Probably. Nobody's telling me if I'm going to get to do what I'm going to get to do. But I'm definitely going to go, watch a lot of movies on the plane, and then walk behind whoever wins.
Are you going to watch Lord of the Rings on the way there?
I'll probably do that.
So you can study the landscape?
Yeah, because so I'll know. It's like scouting.
Yep.
Watching that.
Purest form of e-scouting there is.
Yep. So that's what's happening. You can win a 9-day, 8-night. That's a long time.
That's a good hunt.
That's a good hunt.
That's awesome.
People don't win hunts for that long.
No.
So I'm a little nervous about who might go with me.
So they're the hunter. I just assumed you were the hunter and they were just your guide and gun bearer. But no.
Yeah. No, if I was making the call, you'd be like one 8-night guided trip where you walk behind Ben O'Brien when he shoots whatever he wants.
You have to carry his gun most of the time.
You carry his gun.
Yeah.
Late night foot massages. And you'll hang his clothes up when he gets sweaty. But no, in all honesty, you're going to get a Weatherby rifle package. You're going to get some stuff from Benchmade Knives. And you're going to get kitted out in First Light, and we're going to fly across the world to the southern hemisphere, and we're going to go to the South Island, New Zealand. We're going to hunt Himalayan tahr, which I've done a few times. It is beautiful. Have you ever been there, Anthony?
I have. I've been to New Zealand and hunted tahr.
Oh my God.
The mountains are spectacular, and those animals are incredible.
That's the best. And they're delicious. Don't let their smell, look, their general presence fool you. They're delicious.
Yeah, they're a big hairy goat,
Yep.
kind of deal, and they are delicious.
God, do they smell? But they're delicious. And so you're going to get all of that. And we're going to do it sometime in May. You have until February 29th of this year to enter. And if you go over to firstlight.com, it's firstlight.com/Tar Hunts Sweepstakes.
Maybe you ought to spell tar.
Wait,
Ben.
is it this May?
This coming May.
Wow, that's fast.
That's fast.
That's really
You're going to
fast.
win, and then all of a sudden you're just going to be there with me in a tent.
Can I win that?
Yeah,
I'd like
You're
to.
not. I'm adding this to the legal stipulations. You can't like peas. If you like peas, you can't go. 'Cause I don't want to be around these type of people. You know what I'm saying, Phil?
I don't. Peas are just fantastic.
And I'd like whoever goes to start growing a mustache right away. So we'll put that in the legal addendum at the end when you win. Either way, you can do this if you go to firstlight.com/TAR. Shit. TAHR. There's no shit in the thing. TAHRHUNT sweepstakes. Tar Hunt sweepstakes. Don't include shit. If you type that in there, you're not going to get anywhere. But it's going to be fun. I'm excited. I'm honored that First Light would want to include me in something like this. I don't see a whole lot of giveaways out there in the space like this one ever.
Yeah, that is Joe was saying that's a fast turnaround.
It's a fast.
Normally,
That's a really
you
fast
put in for like
turnaround.
a sweepstakes, you wait a year, and then you might get a phone call, and then you have to wait another 6 months. But
Yeah, man.
no, you've got to put in your time off at work right now.
Yeah.
Even before you win.
Yep.
Visualize
So if
your
you're
success.
putting
Take
in
that
for
week
this.
off right now. Go to your boss and be like, I'm taking this week off. I've preemptively won a hunt with Ben O'Brien.
Confidence right there. It's confidence.
THC. And so we're going to do a lot.
There it
there it
is. We're
Yes,
back.
We're back. I'm still looking for some listener to send me a compilation of all the email dings from my computer on every show. There's one of them. And so I might be able to just give you a spot on the New Zealand hunt if you can put that compilation together. Again, not legal. All kidding aside. Please don't do that. That's it, man. I'm excited. We're going to go. Keep checking back for more details, but first you have to enter. We're going to do a lot of cool stuff on the podcast around this hunt with the winner. So hopefully you are well-spoken and you love hunting. That's really all that matters, and we're going to go have a good time with First Light. So thanks to First Light. We're going to get going. Now, Phil, we got to talk.
Okay, this doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a come to Jesus. We're going to keep Anthony and Joe in the room as mediators.
Yeah, I was going to say, as witnesses, what's happening?
Probably witnesses. Because it might get violent.
I just watched The Irishman last night.
Oh, you did?
And this is a worrisome introduction to a conversation.
Yeah, it is for sure. We got an email. It's entitled "Phil is a Backstabber." Now we've taken some time off from actually recording each week. You got the best of shows. We enjoyed it. Take some time off. I've been very busy with my family, and it seems like Phil, his allegiance is slipping a little bit.
I think we've had something.
Phil,
like
tell the
this-
truth.
Like this conversation in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you like to expand on this thought? What's happening?
There was a guy wrote in, a guy, and his name is Mike Hartman. He wrote in, and the email is Phil is a backstabber. He said, first I would like to point out that there's been an advertisement, Mr. Nella, energy pouches, and you're included on that.
That's true.
And recently you were on a full podcast with the Meat Eater team. Mike also points out.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not gonna lie. This is bad. This looks bad.
It looks bad.
Yeah.
And in recent podcasts, you pledged your allegiance to this show. Don't give me a fucking awkward laugh. I've been off rearing a child.
Yeah, it's something
Trying
like that. Attempting to.
Here you are. He wrote a poem for you.
Okay,
Mike did. I'm going to read it. Mm-hmm. You ready?
go ahead.
The room is filled with a stench from Phil's countless lies. We heard him tell Mr. O'Brien he would be faithful to his side. First on THC, Phil the engineer did we applause, even though Ben made fun of his stash and Mango the dog. We've greatly appreciated his being on THC, but the faithfulness of Phil was never meant to be. Behind you, Mr. O'Brien, we will all stand should you aspire to turn Phil the engineer and inform him that he's fired. Or request that he make a symbol to show that he is true, to stand behind THC, our love could be renewed. I think that's the end.
This is so dumb.
You're not a poet, I guess, Phil.
I mean, no, listen, I'm impressed, and I am honestly flattered, even though it's mostly...
It's called Poem de Phil, was what he titled it.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks, Mike, for writing in and being concerned, because I've been off doing really important things, and Phil's been dabbling around with other folks.
What if I were to tell you, Ben, that I also work on Ryan Callahan's podcast?
Don't care.
I also work on Remy Warren's podcast.
I'm not even looking at you right now, Phil.
You're not. Nope.
I'm looking away.
Ben,
Quiet, Phil.
I'd like to think that you're my number one boy.
Boy, that didn't help.
No. Okay.
That hurt. Anyway, we're going to move on.
He just put a number on you, Ben.
We're going to move on. He called me a boy or something. We're going to move on. Phil, just know that we're watching you. Mike Hartman is watching you. He's writing poems. I imagine he wrote that in his basement or something.
Mike, I said it was dumb, but honestly, that's great.
Good.
And you're not wrong.
It's pretty good. Pretty good. Moving on to more egregious things out there in the hunting world. But we're watching you, Phil. Just know that. I should say we have Cornell ethicist Dr. James Tantillo coming on soon. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about hunting ethics, tragic knowledge within hunting, and a lot of really some topics we're rehashing, but a really good conversation around the philosophies, the deeper philosophies of hunting with Dr. Tantillo. So stick around for that. But before we get to that, Joe Farinato is here to give us a bit of a news report. We're not going to call it a news report because we're going to do some more research after this. But there was a video that came out not too long ago. When did it come out, Joe?
November 30th.
November 30th.
Yep.
This video came out of two young men in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
I think you could accurately describe it as abusing a deer. One of them had shot and wounded. They filmed it, posted it on social media. Snapchat, to be exact. Give us any other details you think are pertinent, Joe.
So they videoed themselves like laughing hysterically while kicking this deer multiple times, and in the full video that originally was posted, there was some more egregious acts, like them really stepping on its throat and like pulling it by the antlers and stuff like that. And it was a really brutal video to watch, something that has hunters and people that care about wild animals and wild places and stuff. It was just really disturbing. Didn't enjoy it. Hit home, but they have now been charged with multiple crimes apiece, 4 felony charges against each of them. Yeah. Aggravated cruelty to animals, 2 counts for each of them, and then aggravated cruelty to animal conspiracy. So, in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. One of them was 18, one was 17.
Yep.
So the 17-year-old is technically a juvenile, 18-year-old being considered an adult in legal circumstances. And so this has become, there's a lot of things that go around this, but I think maybe we should watch the video. I will say that since this video came out, I've gotten dozens, if not 100 or so, messages from people saying that we need to discuss this or go on about it. So this is a serious thing.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have watched it too, and I mean, there's petitions on the internet, and
it's a very serious thing. Part of this, I think, goes to there's a lot of threads. Social media being a big one. These 2 young men being exactly that, being young men, and then just internet outrage and how that influences things in this case. But let's quickly just watch the video and we can comment on it. For those who haven't seen it, I'm not going to hand a link out. You can go find it somewhere. But we'll watch it really quick because we just need to kind of go through this and look at what's happening. So they blurred it out in this video, but this deer is wounded. Looks like maybe he spined it, paralyzed it. The kid filming is giggling while his friend takes 2 or 3 steps and punts this deer in the head. They're cussing.
Grab his horn real easy. Here, put my glove on and grab that horn. Put my glove on and grab. Don't get. He'll try and stab you. Grab his horn.
So now he's trying to grab. This deer is fully alive, clearly paralyzed. They're trying to grab his horn. They already broke one off. This is...
Don't get. He'll try and stab you. Grab his horn.
That's clearly animal abuse. It's, as a hunter, the opposite of everything you'd want to see. It's pretty gross and appalling. I don't know. Any other comments?
Yeah, it's gross and appalling, and it is hard to watch. And it's just, if you've hunted long enough, there's a good chance that you've come up on a deer that you've shot that is not dead, and it's hard to imagine. That's happened to me, and the feeling that I feel immediately is like kind of revulsion and like you're a little sick about it, and you're worried and you feel bad. And my first thought is, how do I kill this deer as quickly as possible right now? And it's just hard to imagine someone having the opposite reaction, that it's an opportunity to sort of abuse and cause more pain to an animal. I don't understand it, other than clearly there's something wrong with these two individuals. It's very hard to watch.
Yeah, if you're old enough, in this case, age being a big thing that I think about. Like, what was I doing when I was that age? I was following the examples of the folks that were taking me hunting, and so these guys are old enough to grab a rifle and get a license and go hunting. They're old enough to treat wildlife with respect that it deserves. This is just a beyond. It's just beyond. And the hubris to post it online,
I think that's one of the big issues there too, because everybody goes to Snapchat because it disappears after 5 or 10 seconds.
Yeah,
or it has that facade, that sense of safety, posting stuff that you don't want people to see for long periods of time.
Yeah.
But once you put something on the internet, it's always going to be there.
There's the tired tropes of like anti-hunters will see this. This isn't, to me, this isn't that. This is what is wrong with these two kids. I mean, they're kids. One of them's 18, but that's still young. And how do they get to this point? I don't know them. I can't prejudge them in any way. My assumption is they're feeling real bad at this point, but in the moment, to see that deer and for your mind to go to, I'm going to get my phone out and film someone. I mean, I never use Snapchat. I don't know how you post to it. I don't know if you film live like you do Instagram, or whether they filmed it and then later posted it. That I don't know. Well, I'm not sure about that. But in the moment, for you to see a suffering doesn't even need to be an animal. Any being suffering at your hand, and to increase that suffering for a laugh, it's pretty sick.
It's very sick.
Pretty sick. I don't think there's any more to say about that. Anybody that sees that video, which these folks voluntarily put out on the internet, that shows another kind of warped way of seeing their own actions. Anybody that sees it is sickened by it. Any hunter that sees it, I think, probably is doubly sickened by it, because the responsibility you have in that moment. Mm-hmm. And this is, in fact, the opposite of what your responsibility is to that animal. Is pissed off. Like, that pisses me off. It pisses me off a lot. But Joe, you found a change.org petition.
Yep.
And what's it say?
So it was written by a guy, Mike Wolf. He opens it up with saying, recently 2 monsters from Brookville, Pennsylvania, which I think is a very strong word to use right in that opening line. Like, he's getting it out there that people need to associate these 2 kids as monsters.
Criminal charge. The title of the change.org petition is Criminal Charges for Violent Monsters Who Tortured Innocent Wildlife.
Yeah.
So in my mind, when I'm watching this video, I'm thinking these are little monsters. Like, I would think that just by like the visceral reaction watching the video. Continue, Joe.
No, I totally agree with you there. And then, he goes on to say they committed sickening acts, which I totally, completely agree with, and is calling for people to sign his petition saying charges need to be filed with maximum sentencing.
Charges need to be pressed. Posting in the case gets their post get deleted. He ends it with saying in all caps, charges need to be filed with maximum sentencing.
Yep. And then this petition has been signed by 771,000 people.
Good Lord.
Wow.
Yeah, like that's a big thing. That is a lot of people seeing this petition. And I mean, I don't know if you guys saw on social media on your own channels and everything when this first came out, just the outrage. I mean, on my personal channels, I had friends
for sure
posting petitions saying we need to throw the book at these kids, just get them out of here. And
yes,
it's disturbing.
It's disturbing. There has to be some separation between how outrageous this video is and how we treat these gentlemen in a judicial manner. There has to be some way, but you often have public officials who are reading this, who are feeling the backlash, who are getting the emails. I know in this case, Joe, you were telling me that was happening.
Yep.
The local officials that were set to prosecute these two kids were feeling the pressure, and they were getting a lot of emails as to why haven't you done something sooner? Why isn't the investigation more swift? Why haven't these
from some of my
men.
preliminary research too, a lot of people have been thinking, in that court of public opinion, people have been thinking that it's been because the older kid, the 18-year-old, is the stepson of the Brooksville sheriff.
Yeah.
So people thought there was, some special treatment going on or something like that, which it was assured by the police department that wasn't happening. And then the game commission is the one investigating, not the sheriff's department.
It just takes longer for some of this stuff to happen than people realize. From
and it seems like they did a very thorough investigation before they came forward with charges.
Yeah, and when the charges that you said there in the beginning, Joe, face a maximum penalty of 37 years in prison. Is that correct? Am I right about that?
Right about. So for Alexander, he's the 18-year-old. So he has 4 felony charges against him, plus 7 more charges, misdemeanors, and things like that. That would, in total, if he got max penalties on all of them and was found guilty on all of the charges, it could lead to 37 years in prison.
What do you think about that, Anthony?
Well, what I think, I'm not punning here, but what I think is that's not for me to say, right? Yeah. That's those laws were written in a certain way for the maximum penalties, and that's the way our legal system works, where laws are passed with sentencing guidelines, and then the trial happens, and there's a whole process for a judge to determine what is the best sentence. And so what I think is, I understand people are angry and angered me, and you think, oh my God, these kids are horrible, throw the book at them. I get that. But I don't know the full story. I don't know any other circumstances. And I trust that that's what the trial and the sentencing process and the judge, that's what their job is. They are the experts on that, not me.
Yeah, and this goes weirdly connects to President Donald Trump. That he signed back in November, signed a federal animal cruelty bill called the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act.
5 days before this happened, it was signed into law.
This is all. I mean, this goes back to one of these two kids being a stepson of a law enforcement official. Then you have this 5 days before it happened. This is a bipartisan bill, and this is what it says. This expands a 2010 law signed by President Barack Obama that banned videos that show animals being crushed, burned, drowned, suffocated, impaled, or subjected to other forms of torture. Now, intentional acts of cruelty shown in videos are also felony offenses. And that's obviously a reaction to things like this. It's obviously a reaction to social media, to the uprise, and people filming everything they do. And now you have a case in the hunting space that connects directly to this legislation. It was bipartisan legislation for once in our damn lives. And I absolutely agree with the way this is stated in the bill and the way it was passed into law. And now you have these two kids, they're going to face it. They're going to face the wrath of this legislation and of everything that they did in that video. So we're going to do some more research on this. We're going to continue to look into it. I think there's just so many, some of these stories just have so many threads and entanglements, not only in our culture, but in how we treat criminals. And in this case, it's just a really interesting story. So hopefully Joe and I will break off at some point and get an article on MeatEater.com to kind of go through the details of this and get everything exactly right, talk to the individuals involved and kind of lay this out in a way that makes sense. Because again, the thing that worries me is that the court of public opinion, when there's a video that's this damning, becomes ravenous, as we see with this petition. It's very easy. It's very easy. Like signing a petition sounds like a serious thing, but all you have to do is put your basic information into fields on the internet, and you have, quote unquote, signed a petition on change.org to punish these kids. That may or may not weigh on the actual decision when it comes down as to what punishment they get, but that's just another example of what I feel is just a reckless court of public opinion, especially when there's something this gross out there in terms of the video. But the legislation backs it up. So I think it's just a story that we're going to continue to look at. So please write us at thc@themeateater.com. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to know about this that you don't already know, because there's a lot of details we left out here. There's a lot of little idiosyncrasies and things. And good journalism, good reporting would bear out that we need to go and get that stuff and present it. Because I think this is an important story, not only for these two gentlemen and what they did, but also for social media and for what we post and how we post for our image as hunters, how we penalize and how we charge people that do things like this. There's a lot that goes into it, and I would take it very seriously. I don't think there's any joking in me on this subject. So write in, let us know what you think. We're going to break off and do some research and come back with even more information on this situation out of PA. Phil, you want to take us home? What do you think?
I mean, I know one of them is 17, but even like everyone around this table kept referring to them as kids. I'm sorry, man. You're old enough to know. One of them is not a kid legally. I was moved out of my house when I was 17.
Oh shit, Phil. We're peeling the onion back.
I'm
no wonder you're a rebel,
I'm
bro.
just saying, but not only are these I'm going to say that they're not children, but they are young enough to have grown up in this social media landscape like Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook. The fact that they committed the abuse and then thought that it was a good idea to put it on the internet because their small circle of friends would think it was funny or something, I guess. And then it seems like there's kind of, what I get is that you seem upset about this change.org petition. That's like, oh, it's like we're coming at these kids with pitchforks and torches, but
yes.
I think they invited that on themselves. A change.org petition is nothing. It's only a way to call attention to something.
Yeah.
And they wanted attention called to what they did, and now they're getting it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Part of the thing, when I look at this, I think 771,000 people just denotes the power of the digital age. Like, people are going to see this, man. If you post something online, and we've seen this, I don't know how many times we talked about it on this podcast or others, we have seen this time and time and time again. Criminals posting illegal things on the internet and getting caught. Like, it is ridiculous.
There's a lot of dumb people in the world.
Just dumb. and I don't, it's alarming to me. The language and the vitriol here is alarming to me, but you're not wrong, Phil. Like, you bring that on yourself when you do stupid things. You live with the consequences. And I don't know I don't know these two kids, gentlemen, whatever we're going to call them, but
not gentlemen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know these people, but I could tell you that to think that you can do this and post it for others to see, the disconnect with reality that is present there, that I'm going to post this for other people to see, is unbelievable.
Yeah.
unbelievable that they wouldn't stop in the moment and say, like, posting this on the internet, even if it goes away in whatever it is, 24 hours or whatever the Snapchat setup is, the wrong thing to do.
Just to do it. I
just
can't
to
even
do it.
understand the
Yeah,
instinct to do it.
Can't either. It's sick to think that.
I just know because, like, you know, the argument being like, oh, well, we all did dumb things when we were that young. Yeah,
Not that dumb.
well, that's a line. There's dumb and then there's evil.
Yeah.
If I saw someone posted a picture on Facebook of me in a dorm room and there was like a beer can in the background, I would go to that person and be like, hey, take that picture down, please. And like, so these guys like tortured an animal and had no problem like sharing it with the world.
It's just awful. I don't know. The first time I've ever been presented with, like, what do they deserve? It's clear that most people that watch this, me included, think they deserve a harsh punishment. I don't know. I just don't know. I can't say that 30 years in jail will fix it. I don't know, but they do deserve to be punished. So we'll go back. We're going to look at this. We're going to talk to as many people as we can that were involved, and we're going to find out as much as we can about it and try to present this case to everyone as it lays out, because there's a lot that we don't know, which is the case with a lot of this stuff. There's a lot that we just do not know. But you know how I learned what not to post on the internet? When I got my first job out of college in the hunting industry, the HR lady called to tell me I got the job. She said, hey, you got the job. Congratulations. I'm all excited. She said, but your MySpace page has a few pictures you might want to take down.
Oh, MySpace.
Yeah. She was like, yeah, see, Joe doesn't even know what MySpace is.
Ben's
You
an
just-
old
you just dated
millennial.
yourself.
He's an old millennial.
Who was in your top 8, Ben?
Oh, I don't know.
MySpace friends, top 8.
There was a time when you couldn't change it, but then it was, man, when you could make your own top 8, you had to think about your circle of friends and who would get
You did.
mad
Yeah.
about who.
I was just like 8 chicks that I liked. If I was single. Okay?
That's how you flirted.
Yeah, that's how I told
Yeah.
them I was into it.
That's good.
So then I went and I looked, and there's me doing beer bongs, me doing all this, college age type business,
Right.
and I just deleted the whole thing. I was like, none of this is worth the benefit that I might get from people thinking that I do beer bongs on the internet.
Especially when you figure out that your employers are looking at that,
Yes.
considering to hire you.
Yes, and this is like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And so for any young folks out there or anyone at all, my God, everything you put online is a press release. Everything. So take that from this. And also, I don't think we could lecture people on not kicking wounded animals. We don't need to do that. But a lot to learn from this, so we're going to continue to look at it.
As you know, the Meat Eater live tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.
Great. Now, James Tantillo from Cornell. It was a really great conversation. We got him on the phone a couple of weeks ago. We talked about a lot of things, including philosophies around hunting, a lot of his thoughts on ethics and the modern hunter. So enjoy James Tantillo.
I guess I grew up on an older road, a pedal to the metal.
Jim, how are you?
Good.
Good. Well, thanks for joining us. We don't do many phone interviews here on the Hunting Collective, but I wanted to make sure that we had this conversation, and we tried to hook up on the East Coast, and it didn't work out. But thanks for taking the time to chat today.
My pleasure.
We want to break into a little bit of your background and what you've done in the academic circles and also in the hunting space. But I guess first, we've talked a lot about ethics on this program. We talk a lot about why we do what we do and our motivations, intrinsic and extrinsic, and the things that we believe to be true. But could you explain to somebody that may not understand ethics, your version of ethics when it comes to hunting?
Well, I mean, I'm a trained ethicist, and I used to give a lot of talks, and I would make the point that when it comes to hunting ethics, there's only 2 or 3 genuine ethics issues, and that's hunting safely, and it's general, sort of a general respect for the law, and the clean, quick kill. And then beyond that, a lot of it, what hunters tend to think of as hunting ethics is really more aesthetic questions about what type of technology to use and how many shells in the gun, whether to shoot on the wing or on the water, and those kinds of questions.
Yeah, and those are the questions I think that persist because they are, at least for me, important to talk about and to compare perspectives and the cultural significance of some of those ideas. Do you feel that that's what's going on, and why, most of those, you could call them debates, you could call them quandaries, whatever the issues within hunting, those things persist in the conversation? Do you feel like that's just because we're always trying to gain those perspectives?
I think that's part of it, but I also think there's basic human nature at work where, many times we criticize what we don't understand, or, and a lot of I get sort of irritated at hunters pointing the fingers at other hunters and saying, well, I don't like the way you hunt, so let's ban the way you hunt. And there's this sort of it's my way or the highway mentality, and I don't think that does anybody any good. In an ideal world, I'd love to see hunters tolerate other hunters and other hunting behaviors, even if they personally don't approve of them or don't engage in them or don't care about them.
Yeah, I think that's something that continues in our community, and just the lack of tolerance. We've talked about this recently, where you wonder if these differences were always there. They're just laid bare with modern technology and the internet and social media. Our differences were always there. We were always, culturally different in the South versus the West, for example. But now those things are being laid bare because we're all connected, and we can see these practices, and that's kind of accelerated those differences.
And there's larger social trends, independent of hunting, apart from hunting, there's less toleration, I think, of differing viewpoints and perspectives, and people are a lot more quick to judge, and there's a lot of self-righteousness. And I think that's true across the board. Yeah,
for sure. Well, before we get much deeper into that, because we'll probably go quite deep on that line of thinking, can you just talk about, right now you're at Cornell University. You've been in the Department of Natural Resources since 2001. Could you kind of talk about why you landed where you did in academia, why ethics, why environmental history, environmental ethics, virtue ethics? There's a lot of things that you deal with that are interesting to me, and would love to know why you landed where you did.
Sure.
I have probably a long answer to that question.
I'll give you the Spark Notes version as much as possible, right? I started out in college as a history major at William and Mary in Virginia, dropped out of college once, took a leave of absence, found myself working at Walden Pond State Reservation in Concord, Mass., home of Emerson and Thoreau, and transferred to Cornell as an undergraduate and dropped out yet again. I was on sort of the 10-year plan for my bachelor's degree. And then when I finally went back to school, I stayed there and got my master's and my PhD at Cornell. And it just worked out that my PhD advisor was retiring. I took over his teaching, and I've been there ever since. It was just sort of being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And when did, I've had a lot of good conversations around why folks that are biologists or that professionally that use their professional time to go outside and study the outside world, the natural world. When was the point in your life that you knew that's what you wanted to do? Was there a point in your life where you knew that this path was it? Was it before that you got into this, or during your time?
Some of them, both my parents are teachers. My dad was a high school principal. My mom taught special ed. I think teaching is in the blood. There's a sense in which it was meant to be, I think.
Yeah. And have you, when you look at ethics, and your study of them, has that connected you more to the outdoors? Do you feel like you understand a little bit more of the push and pull, what's going on out there, as you think of it?
I don't know that ethics by itself, deepens or heightens my appreciation for the natural world. Having studied Thoreau for so many years, he was a sort of intellectual jack of all trades and was interested in natural history. He was interested in philosophy. He was interested in religion, history. And I think I'm a little like that in terms of wanting to know everything about everything. And, I know a very little about a lot of things and much more of a generalist, I think, which kind of goes against the grain somewhat of academic work, because a lot of academics know more and more about less and less. Just they're hyper specialized, and I have very broad interests.
Yeah, when was the first time you really started thinking about, looking at? And I was telling you before we hit record that I read a paper that you sent me from 2001 called "Sport Hunting, Eudaimonia, and Tragic Wisdom." And as I read that, I know it's decades old by now. But as I read that, it struck me as a lot of the things that I've been thinking about and talking about articulated better than I probably ever could. When was the first time you thought about that this was a need, or this was something that talking about sport hunting and the idea of it and the ethics of it? When was the first time you thought that it was either a need of the intellectual academic community or a need of the hunting community? When did that start to happen for you?
Right. When I went to graduate school at Cornell, in the early 90s, I didn't intend to write my PhD on hunting. I was actually more interested in studying animal rights philosophy, believe it or not. And the more I studied animal rights philosophy, the more and more convinced I was that it didn't hold up. And I didn't grow up hunting. So I came to hunting as a 30-year-old adult. I got invited to go along to watch with my fellow graduate students. And it just blew all the stereotypes out of the water. It wasn't a bunch of beer guzzling, highway sign shooting yahoos. The people that I met who hunted were very thoughtful and reflective about it. It meant a lot to them. And then when I tried it myself, it became a passion. And it's been a passion ever since. So, along with all that, I started reading some of the philosophical discussions about hunting and hunting ethics and the morality of hunting, and I realized there was a real need for a more nuanced kind of discussion about the philosophy of hunting. Around the same time, Jim Swan had published his book In Defense of Hunting, and while that's a very, very good book, at the time I thought I don't know that is adequate to the task. And so that's when I sort of decided, man, that's a good PhD topic.
Yeah, it's been a topic that I don't know if I have a PhD in it, but I've definitely run my mouth on it quite a lot.
No, I'm pretty. I'm sure you're close to it anyway.
I don't know if I'll ever get there, but that's why I wanted to have this conversation. I'm interested, though, now that you say this, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I traveled to Berkeley, California over the summer and did some podcasts with some animal rights folks and a vegan philosopher named Robert C. Jones, and talked about the animal rights philosophy and the ideologies of it in depth. And we just there's a lot I think we agree on with vegans. I think the animal rights philosophies, as you just said, have lots of holes in them and can relatively easily be broken down philosophically once you start to go that direction. What did you find as you looked at that early on?
Well, I used to argue that the hunters share much of the animal welfare perspective with so-called animal rights activists. Many animal rights activists don't really believe in rights. They just believe in reducing animal suffering. And hunters are the same way. No hunter, I think, in good conscience, goes out in the morning with the conscious intention of shooting a deer in the ass and having it crawl off in a ditch to die of gangrene 6 weeks later. Hunters want the ideal of the clean, quick kill. We don't always manage to do that, but we generally try for that. So if all goes well, you shoot an animal who doesn't know you're there, and the animal just falls over and never knows what hit it. So I used to make a point of emphasizing that hunters and people concerned with animal welfare share an awful lot in common.
Yeah, for sure. Did you find that where did they fall apart for you? Where did that line of thinking that just fall apart.
In terms of the rights perspective?
Yeah, in terms of the rights perspective.
Yeah, I think the rights perspective is sort of, ignorant about basics about animals in a lot of ways. And, you can treat animals as little, people trapped in animals' bodies, and anthropomorphize animals, the so-called Bambi syndrome. But I think people who work with animals, people who, have pets, people who are thoughtful, I think, know that there's a genuine line or a distinction between human and non-human animals. So I think that's probably the first place where the animal rights sort of philosophy goes wrong.
Yeah, I went to a place called the Dingo Den when I went to Berkeley, and I got to interview an animal rights activist, and he had been charged, I believe, and some of the leaders of his organization were looking at federal charges for doing some breaking into factory farms and other things, and I found that they thought that was a badge of honor. That was something that they were fighting for what they believed to be mass murder, and they wanted a constitutional amendment saying, killing an animal was akin to murder, and spoke about that sometimes flippantly, like that wasn't a huge thing for our world, that we could just move past killing animals, much like we moved past slavery. And I was very uncomfortable with those comparisons.
Well, I respect their motivation, and I believe those folks are as well intended as anyone else. I think that here's where we get back to the ethics topic, that, what a hunter chooses to do in his or her own mind, as regards killing an animal, that's sort of on the hunter and the hunter's conscience. And while I understand there's a role for society to play in trying to prevent animal cruelty, there's a big difference between animal cruelty and legitimate forms of animal use, hunting, farming, raising beef cattle, using sled dogs to pull sleds, or what have you. And so, and those activities generally don't harm other people. They don't harm the animal rights activists. So the animal rights activist starts at a disadvantage, because it's very difficult for them to prove that, the act of hunting out in the middle of the woods, miles and miles away from the nearest town, has any impact on them at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that they often, and was my experience, choose the straw man. Or their factory farming is their straw man, and that's what they go towards, and they'll play that up and use that as an example. And all I have to say is I disagree with that as well. It's a part of my activity of hunting, is to disassociate from those mass slaughters and not knowing where my meat comes from. So, as you said earlier, I think something that everyone that listens to this podcast know that I believe wholly, that vegans and animal rights folks, we don't share the certain tact. We don't share a lot, but we share this animal welfare idea pretty strongly.
Right.
All right. Well, I think moving into the ethics conversation, moving into the paper that you're in 2001, and I know a lot of these things have stood the test of time and really can be a big part of our conversation around ethics and hunting. Do you want to quickly just explain what you determined to be the benefit of hunting, which you describe as the realistic awareness of death? I thought that to be you also talk about tragedy a lot, but I think that realistic awareness of death is a nice place to start.
Sure. Back up a little bit, because in a lot of different places, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and still, people would say, well, why do you have to kill an animal? Why not just use a camera or use paintball? With the camera, if you want to really dress it up, you can paint crosshairs on your camera lens and show that you had the kill shot right at the heart and let the animal live. And so how I got into the topic was wrestling with this question about why death? Why is the death necessary? And the classic sort of line comes from the Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega y Gasset in Meditations on Hunting, where he says, we don't hunt to kill, we kill in order to have hunted. And, I used to make this point a lot. You get somebody who's farther along in their hunting career. They may trophy hunt. They may be holding out for antlers. They may go 5 or 6 seasons without killing a deer. But there's always that possibility that they might have killed had the right deer come along. And it doesn't mean they weren't hunting. And, so to me, I really did wrestle with this, why do you need the death? And to me, there's a whole bundle of virtues that are sort of packaged in, with the act of taking a life, the conscious decision of taking the life, and then dealing with the fallout, the repercussions, the emotional sort of part of it. So in that paper, I talk a lot about this idea of the sort of tragic ambivalence that at the moment of the kill, the hunter is both glad for having done something the right way and a clean, quick kill, but at the same time, there's an ambivalence, there's a sadness, there's a twinge of regret that, geez, I just took this animal's life, and there's a sadness, and that to me is very, very similar to the classic, thousands of years old explanations of the reactions to tragedy, and that's how the tragedy thing came about.
Yeah, and you bring up Aristotle and his insights about tragedy,
right?
And talk a lot about tragedy, and some of the virtues that you talk about, they're emotional and they're intellectual, right? There's crucial.
Right.
You say that hunting is especially well suited for promoting a range of crucial intellectual and emotional virtues,
right?
Which I think is a great way to kind of start that, lay out the groundwork for what these are. You've already talked a little bit about them, but is there any other way you kind of explain exactly the intellectual and emotional virtues that we experience?
Sure. One of the themes that I sort of have pushed for the 20 years since that paper was published, this idea of tragic wisdom, the idea of wisdom coming out of the moment of the kill, and we talked about the person who eats meat but goes to the grocery store and sort of sees the meat in the shrink wrapper and the cellophane and goes home and never gives it any thought. That's a very careless and thoughtless sort of mode of consuming meat. Whereas somebody who's actually been out there for 3 weeks and has waited to the final day of a deer or an elk season and harvested an animal and dealt with, the gutting and the butchering and all of it, there are insights both about animals and about food and about one's own character that you don't get just shopping at the grocery store. And there's an emotional depth to the experience that is also absent when one is simply, eating food from the grocery store or going to McDonald's for a hamburger, for that matter. There's a reason they call it fast food.
Do you feel, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. It's not really covered in your paper, but it's something I've been wondering. I know in the modern sense, we as humans we're given an option. We have the option to kind of disregard where our food comes from, and really most of the things that we interact with, how they're made or where they come from, or kind of the genesis of how they come to be. We have that option, right? We can check out of our consumer, how we consume things, only from food to products to whatever you might put in that bucket. And I think we have this option to walk away from that and live a modern life without understanding where our impacts, or we can do what is increasingly difficult, which is dive into these difficult connections we have with every action we make and the impact that it has, not only on our environment, but on our society, the people around us, whatever. So I think hunting is just now a part of that conversation. How do we stay connected as humans when every advance that we have, both in technology and really every part of our society, every advance moves to disconnect us. And I think hunting just sits in that vacuum.
Well, and there's a larger sort of do-it-yourself ethos that's at play. Nobody can be 100% self-sufficient. Thoreau himself proved that to his own satisfaction 150 years ago at Walden. You had back the times of Marcus Polo and Genghis Khan, with the global spice trade. People get stuff from other places. On the other hand, generating at least a portion of one's own food, again, leads to a kind of intelligence, or at least awareness. And I made the point in the paper that whether you're pulling the trigger on a deer or pulling carrots out of your own home garden, you're getting something. There's value added there that you're getting, and it can lead. It doesn't automatically lead, but it can lead to a kind of deeper wisdom, a deeper knowledge about the way of the world. And death is part of the world. And that's where, I make the point that some of the militant vegetarians who don't sort of see the cost in animal lives of a field tilled for soybeans, for example. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of voles and moles and mice and shrews and, all of it that die for a field of soybeans to make tofu. And, there's generally no awareness. I'm not saying never, but mostly not there.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to enact anything in your life that stands to remove the fact that you're a consumption engine. That's what you do. You wake up in the morning and you consume the world around you in order to live. And so that disconnection is the one thing that bothers me the most, because I think it just, at the end of the day, you must understand. We say these things, and a lot of philosophers have said them better than I, but, life eats life and all this. We say that, but that really is the truth.
Right.
And it's how we come to terms with that and how we decide to move forward with that idea and move forward with how we see the world. That's important, I think. And I think you asked a question here that everyone has tried to answer, I think, which is why does hunting give us pleasure? What is the thing about it that gives us pleasure? And how would you explain that from this?
Yeah,
We've
and
already touched on that.
Here's where you start getting into the deeper philosophical question about the essence of hunting. And Ortega himself said hunting is not, it's a type of diversion. And I think what he meant by that is as recreation, it is fundamentally a form of play. Whether in your own mind you're reenacting the days of the settlers or Davy Crockett or Daniel Boone, or there's a primitivism or an atavism about it that is essentially a type of play acting. You're sort of playing at your role of being a predator within, the broader ecological landscape. And the pleasure is in part derived from the difficulty of the task itself, the challenge, the effort, and here's where, again, the philosophy of play and games and sport give us a very good understanding of how complex games can generate a depth of enthusiasm and appreciation. The cliche that, chess is better than checkers. It's because, chess has many more dimensions in terms of strategy and in terms of moves and in terms of complexity and thinking 5 steps out or 10 steps out. And hunting has that kind of complexity. You need to understand animal behavior. You need to understand plant biology and geology and hydrology. You need to understand the weather. You need to understand wind. You need to understand scent. If you're a bird hunter, you need to understand how your dog works. So all of that packaged together makes hunting an incredibly enriching and rewarding activity.
Yeah,
that's unique. You can't really get that in other places. You can go backpacking on the Appalachian Trail and, you're sort of flying through the landscape trying to, put in your 20 miles, and you're not really stopping to smell the roses or understand much else other than just pounding out miles. And, hunting really immerses you in a landscape and in a habitat and in an environment where, immersion's a good word for it.
Yeah. And we always talk about it being a 3-dimensional experience.
Right.
There's so many things you add to it. If you were to ride on a roller coaster, you get a thrill, you get excitement, but it's 2-dimensional. It doesn't really have depth to it. And it doesn't really have a causation.
And critics of hunting, the roller coaster comparison is really neat because a lot of people who don't hunt think, hunting is all about killing and you're just killing for thrill or killing for fun. And what most non-hunters aren't aware of is the hours and hours and hours and hours that go by where, as Ortega says, you fight the beast's absence. And I think that's a wonderful line because, and people who make the mistake of watching hunting shows on TV, all they see is the moment of the kill, and they don't see the 30 hours of sitting around with cold feet waiting for that to happen. And so that's another thing that lends to the sort of almost character building part of it. It teaches you humility. You have to learn patience, I think, to be a good hunter, among other things.
And I've always wondered, why hunting stuck with me, among other things. My brother is never hunted and is not interested in it. My father kind of went away from it until I got interested in it, but did it as a child. His grandfather never really did it that much. So why did it stick in me? I don't know what my young mind was thinking, but I know now as an adult, I'm sticking with it because of what you're just saying. And I feel like it's transformative for me. And if I can somehow relate that to the people around me and others, I think that's exactly what our society and culture needs.
Right.
You also say in the book, you say the ideals of tragic pleasure and tragic knowledge lead ultimately to my articulation and development of the idea of tragic wisdom in hunting. I think we've already kind of talked around that idea, but can you talk a little bit about tragic wisdom?
Well, you had mentioned how the philosophers will say, life eats other life, and Alfred North Whitehead was the one who said life is robbery. And again, your point that life exists at the expense of other life. And I think that wisdom in part has to do with a recognition of one's own place in the cosmos and one's own place in the sort of the hierarchical chain of being, kind of an old-fashioned notion, but also an awareness of one's own mortality. That animal on the ground, someday that's going to be me. And, it's often commented on how as hunters get older and more mature and as they age, sometimes they occasionally get less and less willing to pull the trigger, or more reluctant, maybe is a better way to put it. And I find that with myself, that as time has gone on, I'm somewhat ambivalent about pulling the trigger. I'll watch 20 or 30 deer go by, and there's a part of me that says, well, not today. And it doesn't mean I'm not hunting. It just, I don't know. As Mike Gaddis says, I think I quote him in that paper, the life you take is not all that different from your own.
Yeah, I think that I've run into that a lot. What do you speak of? A lot of the hunters I admire, some of my idols within hunting and the outdoor space have softened in their older years, have either lost, the gumption of youth, or have become more philosophical in the way that they approach death, and therefore, don't want to experience it as much as they might have earlier. Do you feel like that persists throughout hunting's history?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but I also think, your skills improve as a hunter and you get better at it. I fell in love with grouse hunting. And part of why I fell in love with grouse hunting is because it's so damn difficult. To me, it's the most difficult kind of hunting, to try and locate grouse, have them hold over a point, and then shoot them on the wing. And every single grouse I shoot, if and when it happens, that's a trophy. And, after, 5, 10, 15 years go by, you get a certain amount of competence at it. And all of a sudden you realize it's not really about a body count. It's not to just sort of show, hey, I can do this, because you can do it. And that's where I think hunting turns into more of an art form. And you get more and more interested in the questions of technique and how you hunt. And so this is, people say this with big game hunting all the time. You start out with a rifle, and once you get really good at that, maybe you switch over to archery and you use a compound bow. And then once you get pretty competent at that, maybe you switch over to a recurve or a stick bow. And those additional refinements are a way of keeping your interest in the game, but making the game more interesting and more challenging, requiring more skill or different skills, different levels of effort. And I think hunters who go through that kind of metamorphosis, I think, continue to find that the hunt enthralls them and engages them in the absence of a body count.
Yeah. And it's fun to, if you even think about those around you, folks that you're hunting with, folks you've known for a long time, to watch other hunters go through those changes and to start, I've watched and talked to a lot of through our current efforts here at the Hunting Collective, a lot of adult onset hunters, as we call them. I think we got to come up with a different name probably for that, but something more appealing. But adult onset hunters, how quickly they move through the process that took me 2 decades to move through. How quickly they move through just wanting to be safe and understand what's going on, to wanting to study the natural world, to then wanting to understand death, and then jumping into the culinary aspects of it, and it starts to just enrich their life in ways that they would never have imagined. And so it's good to kind of hear you articulate the philosophical bounds in which that all happens.
Yeah, that's been my experience anyway.
Yeah. You say you quote Richard Palmer in this piece, that the tragic form generates
theory of tragedy, right?
Yeah, it's theory of tragedy, and it starts by saying an essential part of tragedy is unresolved and unresolvable emotional paradox.
Right.
You talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this would be that twinge of regret at the moment of the kill. When I was doing my PhD, the dissertation research, I ran across an old Victorian print. I think I might even describe it in that article or in other places, where it shows a bird hunter. And he's got the double barrel shotgun just cracked open, a little wisp of smoke coming out of the breech. He's holding a bird, I believe it was a woodcock, and he's got his setter at his knee, and he's looking at the bird kind of funny. And it's at the moment of the kill. He's just harvested this bird, and the title of the print was "The Moment of Regret." And again, it's that idea that hooray! I did it. I got what I was out for. And at the same time, now I wish I hadn't done it, or I wish I could throw this bird back up in the sky and do instant replay. And again, it's not that the kill validates the hunt. It's the hunt itself that's the pursuit. It's the thrill of the chase. That really old-fashioned notion, the thrill of the chase. And people who run hounds are probably the most articulate about this, whether you're hounding bears or raccoons or rabbits with beagles or with hounds with mountain lions. A good friend of mine was a Montana biologist years and years ago, and he wasn't himself a mountain lion hunter, but he had gone along on a bunch of mountain lion hunts, and he says, the first time the houndsman will take a sport out, and then the sport they'll tree a mountain lion, and the guy from out of state will shoot a mountain lion so that he can say he's done it and take the pelt and whatever. If the hunter comes back the following year and they reenact the hunt, he says more often than not they'll tree a mountain lion, and the hunter will elect not to kill the mountain lion. And this friend of mine, Sean, he says that's the closest thing I've ever seen to catch and release hunting. And what he was describing was the fact that what's exciting about mountain lion hunting is listening to the damn hounds and following, in a Jeep or on a horse or on foot, even with GPS on all the collars and all of it. That's the excitement. The shooting of a cat out of a tree is anticlimactic. There's just nothing to it. And I think that also captures something of this idea of the, again, it's the pursuit. It's that's what matters.
Yeah, and the other concept you touched on here too is the respect, right? When that moment of regret comes, and we try to depict that as a hunting community, we're also trying to depict there's some respect there,
right?
And how and that you talk about this paper, but I know like there's a lot of anti-hunters and that scoff at the idea of the respect that you can have for an animal you just killed.
Right.
Talk through that.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, partly people criticizing what they don't experience or don't understand, and I think the idea of respect at the moment of the kill, it's why you go through such efforts to, clean the animal and get it quickly on ice or cooled and, packaged and frozen. In part, you're honoring the animal. And not just that individual animal, but the species. If you kill a deer, that individual deer you've just killed is kind of a totem for deer in general. And the game suppers and the celebration of the lives that have to be sacrificed to sustain our lives, that's part of that respect. That's part of that honor, and all of that's highly ritualized. It's a type of cultural celebration, but it's another very important part of hunting writ large. It's part of the total package.
Yeah, and I think when you start talking about death again, you get back to that concept, and then you have a respect for death and what it really means and what it looks like in its raw form. Because I think we've talked about this on this program, we've taken a lot of new hunters out. And the thing that struck me that's fairly consistent about this, and that struck me the most, I guess that you could say struck me emotionally the most, is the idea that you might drop an animal on the spot. There may be some muscle twitch, a leg may jump. We've all seen it as hunters. You kind of know what's happening. This animal is just the last vestige of its life. It's dead, but there's still a little bit of life left. I've seen a lot of new hunters struggle with that. And when I was a 12-year-old boy, I'm telling my dad, shoot it again, shoot it again, shoot it again. I've seen that from a lot of other new hunters as I've taken out folks here in the recent decade. What do you think that is? Do you think that's just us, being confronted with death and not wanting to see it, not wanting to understand that there is a struggle there?
Yeah, that's partly it. But I think, I may not answer your question very directly, but I'll answer a different question that you haven't asked, about hunter recruitment and bringing young people into hunting and non-hunters into hunting. I think a lot of times we make the mistake, or the hunting community does, by pushing people to hunt big game right off the bat, hunt deer, and you get these 6-year-olds on YouTube hunting deer and, 12-year-old, whoever, girls, boys. And the older tradition of starting youth out with small game, whether it's rabbits or squirrels, the emotional impact, what you're easing them into that emotional ambivalence at the moment of the kill if you start small or smaller. And I think if you start with rabbits, or you start with pheasants, or you start with pen-raised quail or chucker, and move your way up slowly to the point where, you tackle big game down the line. And I think that would make it a lot easier, if we allowed young hunters to go through that progression, so that they don't sort of overreact at that moment of death when the legs, of the deer are kicking.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we do them any favors by sort of pushing that process.
How about yourself in your own life when you're, we've talked about this in the past in the podcast, how we're kind of comparing the experience of being an adult onset hunter, the way you're able to acknowledge some of the entanglements, whereas a 12-year-old, you're just, as this is how I came to it, just following my father.
Right.
It was more about being with him and being around. And it develops into other things, but it's certainly there. And folks that are coming to it when they're 35 or 40 or older are able to appreciate the entanglements and walk when they're getting into it. How did you find that in your early experience?
Well, I don't know. Here's another case where I'm probably not going to answer that question, but a different one. And,
I like it.
It has to do, we have different motivations with different kinds of hunting. So for grouse hunting, I'm going to do everything the one true correct way. I always make a big joke of this. It's with a double gun shotgun, a Parker, built in 1910 over an English setter, and only in the air, and a 16 gauge. And, so to me, the artistry of grouse hunting is partly what motivates me to get out in the woods, versus deer hunting. I'm more about filling the freezer, and the first deer that comes along, 7:01 on opening day, if it's brown, it's down. And I'm not as interested in making deer hunting a kind of art form. Whereas I have other friends, who, they'll still hunt deer, they'll track them in the snow, they'll do the entire archery season waiting for Moby Buck to come along. And that's what defines them as hunters. Duck hunting, you can carve your own decoys out of cork and build your own duck calls and shoot them on the wing, or you can put a bunch of plastic flambeau deeks in the water and loose the first mallard that swims among your decoys, and it's all good. To me, this is where we get back to the thing about hunters pointing their fingers at other hunters. Everybody, most hunters are purist about one or two different kinds of hunting. But it's rare that somebody's a purist about absolutely all of them. When I'm grouse hunting, I'm usually by myself. When I'm goose hunting in January on my back in a cornfield, there's 5 or 6 guys with me, and partly what makes that fun is the group hunt part of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not a very social person. I don't generally like to group hunt, but goose hunting is the one place where I love it. That's become kind of a passion for me.
Yeah, and it's funny how those things go in your life, where that you're introduced to something, and to me, it's time and access, or time and opportunity often are big factors in it. But for me, I really love sitting in a tree stand for 12 hours. I mean, you just don't. Right. There's a meditation there, whether you accept it or not. It just doesn't happen. Right. You can walk around and ask a million people, "Have you ever sat in a tree all day?" And all of them will probably tell you no. And so there's some, but I also love being in a deer camp with a bunch of guys and sharing that experience. And I've increasingly been more drawn over the last couple of years to being with a lot of people while I'm hunting, where before it was a more solitary thing. So I guess maybe hunting can be a reflection of where you're at in your life in that way. What do you value?
I think that's really true. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's fun to kind of compare and contrast with other people when they came into hunting, where they value it, and how that's moved around. Right. I love that conversation because I think it provides all kinds of perspectives that we were talking about. One thing we've brought up a bunch, I don't know that we've explained it as well. You explain in your paper, hunting is a serious art. And you quote Joyce Carol Oates. She says, she speaks of the awareness of life's tragic ambiguity that serious art provides. And she makes an argument then about the sport of boxing should be considered a serious art. Right. And you argue that hunting, and you mentioned that hunting is a serious art. Can you kind of talk through that philosophical construct a little bit?
Yeah. The Joyce Carol Oates book, by the way, is just tremendous, and if you don't know it, you should go out and buy it today.
All that there's about 4 or 5 books. I've read Ortega, but some of these other things are great.
Yeah, no, it's a great book. But when I was doing my dissertation work and thinking through this kind of theme, I looked to other blood sports and other activities for sort of analogous ways of interpreting hunting. And the thing that really struck me was the Spanish bullfighting. And the bullfight literature, unlike the American hunting literature, or even the global, whether it's German or, people who've thought about hunting, recreational sport hunting, the bullfight literature is the most self-aware collection of accounts of people interpreting the bullfight, not as a bullfight, not as killing a bull, not as waving a cape around, but just how to interpret the larger sort of cultural phenomenon of the bullfight and how to assess its meaning. And to me, the Spanish people in general have been very conscious of the sort of larger symbolism of the bullfight for hundreds of years. I mean, now sadly, a lot of that is slipping away. And they're starting to ban the bullfight in more and more locations. But at least for a long while there was an awareness of the bullfight as a type of artistic dance. And again, all highly ritualized and all choreographed, and every little move down to the pirouettes, they each have a unique meaning. And an excellent book in English language is Hemingway's Death in the Afternoon. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was what was missing from the sort of American, philosophy of hunting literature. I mentioned Jim Swan. There's a host of others, Ted Karasote, David Peterson, all of them. And most of them don't interpret hunting as a cultural phenomenon. They interpret it sort of as a biological act of harvesting food. And I think that it leads to a set of blinders where you fail to sort of recognize hunting's true greatness at, provoking these larger themes and these larger thoughts and this deeper awareness about the human place in nature. Hunting can generate that. Yeah. It doesn't often, but it can.
Yeah, if you allow it to, it definitely can. If you see it for what it is and can be, it definitely can. And not always, but it will more often than not provide that. Yeah.
Well, there's difference. You have reflective hunters and you have people who are unreflective hunters, but that's not unique to hunting. I mean, that's true in society in general. You have a lot of people who they're just not reflective. They don't think in sort of like philosophical ways, and that's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you can see that in boxing too. I mean, there's probably a lot of boxers that think it's a sweet science, and there's others that think, well, I have to do this to win.
Right.
Or
people on the outside looking in who just like, that's two idiots beating the snot out of each other. It's like, which misses basically the whole point. So
do you feel like these things, hunting is one of those things that that has depth, and if you want to understand it in the way that you've articulated and understand it, you have to spend time with it, and you have to be around people that really appreciate it in this way. Much like bullfighting, I wonder if our society, because how complex and difficult this is, and there are so many other options out there, that if we just like naturally move away from it, in a sense.
I wrote that 350-page dissertation, and I handed it to my mother. And she read it, and she hands it back, and she summarized it in 10 words. She's like, your argument's basically don't knock it until you've tried it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. that was an instantly humbling moment because, why'd I just spend, X number of years and 350 pages on an argument? But I don't think you absolutely have to hunt to understand hunting. I think it's possible for a non-hunter to grasp some of the essence of what hunting means to other people, even if it's not their taste. And I'll go back to that Ortega quote, man does not hunt to kill, he kills in order to have hunted. During my dissertation, my wife, God bless her, didn't grow up hunting. She's a suburban Connecticut, urban vegetarian for a long while. Hunting was about as far from what she wanted to be thinking about as anything could be. And I would mention that Ortega quote to her, and she's like, I don't get that. That doesn't make any sense. That's sort of stupid. And I thought about that for quite a while, and then it finally hit me. I had an analogy. I said, it's a lot like shopping, right? And she likes to shop. She grew up going to suburban Connecticut malls. I say, you don't shop to buy, you buy in order to have shopped. And all of a sudden, it's like you could see the little light bulb go off over her head, and she's like, yeah.
That brings me so much. It brings me so much joy to hear you say that, because I say that to my wife all the time. I'm like, it's the Black Friday thing's like opening day of deer season. Exactly
you go to the mall, and you sort of browse, and you come home with some trinket. It's like, okay, it validates what you did, and even though she's never hunted, I think that moment was an eye opener for her. She finally kind of got, I think, at least that truth, that dynamic.
Yeah, and having conducted the hunt right, or even shopping, if you really appreciate it, you can do it better if you understand that's right. What you're after, right? And you can really appreciate those smaller things. And I've certainly over the last couple of years tried to hunt slower, and be more deliberate and treat it like a craft, because that's how I feel it is, for sure. And the conclusion of your paper, you said something that I think is the crux of this show, kind of the genesis of why I felt like this is a worthy to have a podcast, a weekly podcast. You said the contemplation of death in hunting can be a tragic pleasure. Hunters and philosophers of the hunt consistently agree about the necessity of the kill, but they often disagree about why. Why do we hunt, and why is hunting a good thing? And I think that's something that we could tear down and build back up forever, but is a great discussion.
Yeah.
Do you think that we'll ever be able to collectively understand that each of us has a why, but there's also this macro why, this collective why that we can all articulate together? I mean, I know that's a struggle for all of us. And we started off in the beginning saying social media has kind of highlighted our differences, and it makes it hard to understand why, right, for everyone.
Yeah, I think so. I used to have this conversation with people in the natural resources department. For years and years, the last 20 or 30 years, wildlife managers have been panicking about hunter recruitment. Oh, hunting, the age of the hunters is going up. We're not recruiting young hunters. The number of licenses sold every year is going down every year. And I used to sort of respond with, hunting will never go completely out of fashion, mainly because it's such a compelling activity. And there's absolutely no other way that one can experience nature firsthand, that sort of total immersion experience. When you're actively seeking your prey wandering around the woods, you're participating in a way that you're not when you're just hiking. And that's, I don't know. There are people like Jim Swan or others who think, well, that's genetically encoded in our genes. I don't know if I buy that, but I just think that people will always find that experience valuable.
Yeah.
And so I don't think hunting's ever going to go away. I really don't.
Yeah, I wonder about its future and where it'll go. We're certainly going to move. We're certainly moving further from it, I feel. But there's also the idea that as we become more urban and disconnected, there'll be this need for that medicine, this need of a return to these ideas, and hunting will be there to kind of to catch that spasmodic. Well, we got to go back. We got to go back and understand the natural world.
Right.
So hunting will be there.
Well, and you are just like you mentioned. I mean, the whole locavore movement is very encouraging. Just the fact that you have people who care about their food, they care about what they put in their bodies. To have organically grown deer meat or elk meat or goose meat, is a lot different than the unknown stuff that you're buying at the store. And a lot's been made recently about the so-called Impossible Burger and the Veggie Burger and all. And, people are failing to grasp this is one of the worst developments food nutrition-wise. You've got this totally 105% uber-processed piece of food with you don't know what chemicals in it. People are thinking, oh, this is great for the planet. And
nothing dies. Yeah, nothing dies.
Let's diagnose this 5 years from now when people start getting lumps in their lips or whatever.
That's my favorite thing. If I was trying to have the Impossible Burger CEO on, and for some reason he didn't want to come on.
There you go.
It was weird that he denied our request. But I was going to ask. I was going to say, no animals were killed by this burger, but we are going to die. And if you're going to create a burger and immediately sell it at Burger King, that's not going to do you well on the marketing side, because Burger King's not necessarily worried about our health too much. So good luck with that.
Yeah.
But there's some false prophecy there, right? I mean, I think people are trying to.
Well, and the thing there that complicates it is this the fear factor of the link to climate change, and I think there's a lot of bad information and misunderstanding about climate change and how bad it will be and so it's that's you're sort of fighting fake news in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure, and the reasons people step into that world, the world of veganism and trying to disconnect from death and stop suffering, all those things are impossible to achieve. And now we have lab grown meat, we have all these things are gonna come up. And I've told people, I don't know what you think about this, but I'll tell people that I wouldn't mind if there was an alternative to store-bought meat for everyone. If it was plant-based, that's okay. But we need to realize that's going to be as hard as it is to get rid of factory farming and mass animal consumption. I don't mind. I would much rather have a veggie-based hamburger than eat a factory-farmed version. But I'm also not going to sit there and think it's a guilt-free sandwich.
Right.
Do you think about that often? Like, how do we get that through to people? How do we understand that, even though certain movements, certain lifestyles might make you feel good, they're not necessarily what they purport to be?
Well, there again, you get back to the, people not being very self-reflexive or self-aware about those kinds of things. A lot of people just don't want to, have to do that kind of thinking. And that's fine.
That's fine. That's true. Yeah, and it is. We know the answer to this question. If you would ask somebody, is not killing something virtuous? Most people say, well, yeah, if you don't have to, it certainly is virtuous. You asked this question. I think it's an important one. Can killing be virtuous? Can you try to explain the question and the answer there?
There again, I think the hunter owns up to the death that he or she causes. So at the moment you pull that trigger, you own it. And you accept that responsibility, and you can elect not to pull the trigger. So like this deer season, I not pulled the trigger more than I pulled the trigger. And that's a very different kind of moral ownership than the casual vegetarian who pats him or herself on the back and says, well, how virtuous I am, look at me, and is 100% wholly unaware of the cost in animal life of basically factory vegetable farming. Again, the soy, soybean analogy there, incredible cost in animal life, and that's just, looking the other way.
Yeah, it is. And it's hard to, and we've talked about this a lot, how it's very hard to convince someone who just doesn't want to think about it.
Right.
And a lot of times, and I wonder going forward, is it the least complex idea that's going to win in popular society? Is it the fact that if you don't kill something, you don't have to kill something? If you don't eat meat, something doesn't die. That seems to be, hunting is shrinking, veganism is growing. We've talked about that on this show a lot. That's not exactly apples to apples, but that is happening. So I just wonder how we're going to, over time, fight this idea that we have this complex, enriching thing on one side and a pretty easy to sensationalize and understand idea. And if you don't eat this meat, something doesn't have to die.
Right.
Do you think there's an end game there?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I do think there's an ebb and a flow. I think, in my own career as a college teacher, 20 years ago, I had a lot of students very interested in animal rights. And right now, I have basically zero students interested in animal rights. They've moved on to other sorts of themes. And so part of my background is also in history and looking at sort of things like this historically. I suspect the pendulum will swing back again at some point in the future toward more consumptive uses of wildlife and recreational pursuits such as hunting but there again, I'm more of an optimist in terms of my personality. I think I'm a half full kind of guy, and pessimist might not be so sanguine, I guess.
Well, Jim, I really appreciate the thought process here. I know there's, as I started to look into your work and read some of your more current writings, there's a lot that you're into. I guess I'll apologize for only focusing on this one paper and this one idea, but like I said, it's increasingly interesting to me. It's something I think we could obviously explore. And there's so many references and so many sources that you used in this paper that's probably going to take me a couple of weeks to try to pick up all these books and add them to my collection and read some of those. What are some of your favorite books or resources out there that folks might be able to go to learn a little bit more of these kind of philosophical?
In terms of hunting?
Yeah, in terms of hunting.
I'm a big fan of sort of the earlier turn of the century, mostly East Coast hunting writers. This is another interesting thing to think about historically about American hunting. The center of gravity used to be New York and the publishing world in New York. And so you had people in New England like William Harnden Foster who wrote, New England Grouse Shooting, for example. That over time and after World War II, the center of gravity has shifted to the West. And now you have sort of hunting media and social media dominated by largely, sort of Western big game hunting. Montana is the epicenter of all of that.
It's our fault.
Yeah, well, there's good things about that, but there's bad things about that, right? Because increasingly you have the sort of vision of hunting being shaped by Montana big game hunting and elk hunting in particular. And, deer hunting as it's practiced in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan, which has more license holders than there are Montana residents, gets kind of short shrift or gets sort of shifted to the wayside. And to me, I think that's a little unfortunate. So, I actually think the hunting community would benefit from a re-engagement with a more geographically diverse set of hunting writers.
Yeah, for sure. We've tried very much here. We like at Meat Eater especially, and even on this show, we understand the leaning.
Yeah.
And I've explained my aspirations to go west started when I was a little kid.
Right.
And I am happy I'm here, but I do, as an East Coast guy, we were talking about my my upbringing where I was from in Maryland, I do understand that. And I do know that most hunters see this as a once in a lifetime or once every year thing. And there's a lot of hunting, a lot of things that take place, especially I always think of Pennsylvania. And I'm glad you brought that up, as kind of this vestige of a different way of hunting, deer drives, and they do bear drives there still. And,
exactly. Yeah.
And these things, there's millions of hunters that take part in this, and we cannot forget that as we aspire to kill an elk. Or it's elk hunting is great, but there's just as much value in what's happening there.
Or in the South, where they still hunt deer with hounds. I mean, you could go to South Carolina or Louisiana or Florida, and when I used to do the hunter ed presentations, I used to emphasize, look, as hunter ed educators, you're not just training people to hunt in your state, but eventually they're going to get old enough to go hunt somewhere else as a non-resident, and the hunting practices are going to differ from what they are where you live.
Yeah.
And you can't sort of raise sort of ethical absolutists who say, well, the way we do it in Montana is the only way, or the way we do it in Virginia is the only way. And, if you do bear baiting or, bait deer in Michigan, that's evil. There's a topic for a whole nother podcast. I got involved years ago with the bear baiting ballot referendum up in the state of Maine that the HSUS was pushing. And, baiting is controversial. And there you had a classic case where you had hunters who didn't like baiting, pointing their fingers at people who baited and said, well, I don't like the way you hunt. Let's ban the way you hunt. Yeah. And
I struggle with that. I've always struggled with that. I think baiting is the most fascinating conversation within these kind of I guess you call them ethical arguments or arguments within hunting. I think it's the most fascinating because there's science that says if you bait for deer, there's close contact, unnatural contact between the animals. There's spread of disease. There's also this idea that if you want to be an ethical hunter, have the closest, easiest kill to dispatch the animal, then you would bait for bears.
Right.
You would bait the bear. And there's this idea that that's not sporting and what really is hunting. And so it kind of it just gets at all of these cultural touch points in a way that is damn interesting to me. And I don't know you'd ever figure it out other than your explanation.
And context matters. Even in ethics, there's this idea of contextual moral reasoning. To have an organic garden in the South is a lot different than expecting somebody who lives above the Arctic Circle, native Inuit, to be an organic farmer because they're dealing with permafrost. So you have to think contextually. The context in Texas is going to be different than the context in Maine, is different than the context in California.
Have you thought much about how social media has really contributed or in negative or positive ways to this topic?
Social media is probably one of the worst things to happen to civilization ever. There you go.
I love it.
Quote me on that.
Agreed.
It favors sound bites and, the Twitter 140 character sort of and instant responses where people they don't give it any thought at all, but they just snap with a knee-jerk reaction. And a lot of that's really bad. Gone is the sort of the long-form essay. I mentioned those turn-of-the-century writers. They would polish their writing for a week before they submitted it. Even a podcast is better than Instagram-type posts. I don't know. On the other hand, there is a type of consciousness raising. One of the things that happened with hunting about 20 years ago, there was this idea, just hide it. Don't go into the diner with your camo.
Yeah.
Don't strap the deer to the roof of your car. And I don't think there's anything to be gained by driving hunting underground as if you're embarrassed by it. I think hunters need to just be themselves out in public and the public benefits, I think, from an awareness of how many damn people hunt.
Yeah.
And not evil people. They're not bad people. They're your neighbors. They're your friends. That's, so.
Yeah, I feel like that idea came from my father's generation.
Right.
Or maybe prior to that. I don't know. That this idea that if we just don't highlight what's going on, no one will have anything to attack. Like, wow, that's a reductive way to move through the world.
Right.
That's really hard. I think social media has forced us into these conversations a lot of ways.
Right.
We got to have them now because a lot of people there's 11 million hunters and a good portion of them are sharing what they do online.
Right.
And it gives us a lot to criticize, a lot to celebrate, and I think has shifted the way hunters move through the activity of going out to kill something. There's different little touch points that you got to take a photo at the end. You got to do this, you got to do that. It's kind of changed the way that we do it in a lot of ways. So I like that you said that it's the worst thing to ever have, because I couldn't agree with that anymore.
Well,
possible.
Maybe they'll improve. Who knows?
We'll get better at it. I mean, we're probably better at it. I think as hunters, at least, we're better at it now than we were in its infancy, which it hadn't been around very long. I was in college when I first heard the word Twitter, and we laughed a lot about it. So we got some time to go. Well, Jim, thanks so much for checking in with us and taking the time. I am not sure. I'll say this. I was gonna say I'm not sure how interested people are in ethics, but I will tell you this. I've done some speaking engagements and some live events where we talk about ethics and hunting and have very similar conversations to these. And I've found all the audiences to be engaged, often stay way longer than the allotted time. And people are just interested in this and even excited by it, understanding that it will be a sometimes strenuous conversation. Sometimes there'll be no answer. Sometimes it'll be deeply personal.
Right.
But it's a conversation I've been real heartened that people are willing to have and excited to have. So I appreciate you taking part in it.
Sure thing. It was fun.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
That's it. That's all. Episode 97 is done. Thank you to Dr. Tintillo. Thank you to Anthony Licata, our editor-in-chief. Thanks to our community manager. His name is Joe Farinato. The only thing I'll say is don't forget to go to firstlight.com/tarhunt-sweepstakes, firstlight.com/TAHRHUNT sweepstakes to enter to go to New Zealand with me. Phil's not allowed to go.
Why not?
It's complicated.
Okay, well, I'm disappointed.
Well,
it was my idea to make 2020 the best year of THC, and now you're not even.
I'm not even gonna. No.
I'm hurt.
Phil's hurt. He'll get over it. We're gonna find some fun things in 2020 to do with Phil, to Phil, about Phil,
to me.
Yeah,
can't wait.
It's gonna be great. I promise. You're gonna love it. Next week, another great show coming at you. I've been churning on lab-grown meat for a while, so you go to themeateater.com. You can read an article that I wrote about meat grown in a petri dish. It's crazy. It's sci-fi, and it's coming for us. So go read themeateater.com. There's a story there I wrote about lab-grown meat. Go over there and read it. That's your homework for next week, because we're going to talk about it. It's going to be a good time here at THC. We'll see you then. Bye.
Here too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven. Sitting as the boss who it starts to grow roots. I'm feeling like an old worn out pair of shoes. Oh, tell me what is it that I should do?
As you know, the Meat Eater live tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.